The Color Matrix, World 16, Excalibur in a world ruled by a madwoman. My most recent task of exploring evil versions of myself left my mind frazzled for a few days. Sparks told me I could rest for a while, so that's exactly what I did. After a few days of gaming, training, and meditation, I went back to work. I wanted to start off with something a little comfortable, so I explored the multiverse of the Power Rangers. I noticed something odd, a cluster of universes with some red glowing strings of energy connecting them. Of course, it was just a form of a visual aid for the human eye to understand, but it left me kinda curious. "Yo, Big D, what's with the strings?" I asked.
Yes, sir. There is a connection between each universe. A Power Ranger is exploring these, to each one having a connection to some kind of ranger. Mark, the Red Cornish Ranger, to be exact.
Daisy explained. "Wait, Mark? I know him, he's one of William's protectors," I replied.
Sir, it is recorded that you've already explored one of these universes.
Daisy told me. "Oh, really?" I said with a grin. I picked one of these universes and loaded it into the Color Matrix.
In this universe, the Royal Britannia Rangers were never created. The legendary witch Morgan Le Fay rules over the United Kingdom and the magical realm, or mystic realm, however you want to call it.
Daisy explained to me. I nodded in understanding. I stripped off my shirt and laid down on the bed. The needles punctured the back of my neck and my fingertips, and Daisy read me my vital signs. I lost consciousness. I woke up and stretched before climbing out of my sleeping bag. I packed it away and explored the room I was in. For the last 3 days I'd been sleeping in the base of the legendary Merlin, who at the moment was in a coma-like state. I had tried to wake him, but had no luck. I had found the base after a few weeks of investigating. I was a thief for hire. Morgan Le Fay hired me herself. She wanted me to find and steal a very powerful weapon, Excalibur, the legendary sword that once belonged to King Arthur. The sword was connected to the morphing grid and could bend the laws of physics and outsmart the rules of magic. I stole the sword from Merlin, but I wasn't going to give it to Morgan Le Fay. I wasn't stupid. I was going to keep the sword away from the fine ruler of the country, who happened to be a major nutcase. I looked around the room when suddenly a small orb flashed quickly, indicating someone above me at Stonehenge was about to enter. I closed my eyes and pushed my foresight, allowing my sight to see a man entering the base. I opened my eyes and collected my stuff quickly. "Yo, old man, sorry about the sword, but don't tell whoever that is, okay?" I told Merlin. I then left out of the secret tunnel I used to break in, taking Excalibur with me. I climbed out into the open air and headed into the city. The city was ruins, the early work of Morgan Le Fay, to showcase her strength and to signal a response to those who had a slight thought in retaliating. I kept down, ducked down. Morgan Le Fay had still had her foot soldiers all over the place, and in different flavours as well, scanning the cities and old towns for anyone trying to band together or flee. I had Excalibur on my back. It was surprisingly light. I kept a quick pace in my step. I could hear activity far off in the background. I ducked down into an alleyway and I stopped and took a swig of water. Then I checked to make sure I wasn't being followed. I then turned around and stopped dead in my tracks as 3 guys stood before me. "Hand over the goods, kid," one guy grunted. I'm 20, dumbass," I snapped. The 3 guys pulled out pipes or blades, ready on the offensive. Automatically, like my body moved on its own, I pulled out Excalibur. One guy swung his pipe at me and I blocked it with the sword. The blade hummed as it made contact. I had no time to gasp or wonder on how I was doing what I was doing, as the leader jabbed his knife at me. I twirled the sword in my hand, which knocked the knife out of his. I then lunged forward and the tip of the blade stabbed him in the shoulder. I pulled the sword from the man and I kicked the 3rd man back. They all scurried to their feet and they all ran off. I then took out a long sigh and walked away in the other direction. I walked out into the street and several energy blasts hit the ground. I looked up to see a group of smudges, a foot soldier type built from old metal, clay, bones and fused together by magic. One of the few sets of foot soldiers that made Morgan's army. They aimed their blasters at me. I gripped onto Excalibur and I gathered she had realised that I wasn't heading back to Buckingham Palace to hand her the legendary weapon. Suddenly a flash of images hit me like a ton of bricks. The sword and the morphing grid. The morphing grid was granting me ways to defend myself. I held out the sword. "Excalibur! Staff formation!" I called out. In a blinding light, the sword changed into a long staff, silver in colour, and the top was tipped with a diamond shape with a small blue crystal embedded in the middle. I held out the staff, and a bolt of pure white light shot from the tip and struck one of the smudges. It hit the floor, flopped around on the ground, and phased away, leaving no trace of its existence. Then the other smudges opened fire. I slammed the staff on the ground and the bolts hit an invisible barrier created by my staff. They stopped firing and their blasters transformed into swords. They all ran at me. Excalibur, axe formation! I called out, and once again the staff shifted into a double-headed axe. I swung the axe with ease, slashing down the smudges. Slashing, dodging, blocking, and striking down the smudges with ease, with extreme focus, like it was something I'd practiced for years. I struck down the last of the smudges, and the axe shifted back into the Excalibur's base sword form. I looked down at the sword. The smudges one by one phased away as the magic that made them left their bodies, and I realised the sword had more power than most weapons. I could not let the sword go into the hands of someone as powerful and as dangerous as Morgan Le Fay. I decided it was time I took Excalibur and leave England. 6 weeks passed, and I found myself in Scotland. I kept to myself, making sure not to talk to anyone, making sure no one saw me. I walked the lonely streets of Glasgow. There were people around, but they all hid away, keeping in groups or gangs, depending on how you looked at it. I woke up and packed away my sleeping bag when I heard an almighty, blood-curdling scream. I was stationed in a train station. The trains hadn't been in operation in a few years. Morgan Le Fay didn't want anyone travelling between the countries. I was still finding twigs and mud in the crevices of my boots when I had to walk through the borders. I peeked out of the window and saw a young woman being hassled by stickers, skeleton-like foot soldiers, another segment of Morgan Le Fay's army. I argued with myself. I should keep low and hide away, but how would I live for myself knowing that a woman could die today if I didn't step in? I jumped out of the station and bolted to the woman. I drew Excalibur from its sheath and stood between the stickers and the frightening young lady who had fallen to the ground. The stickers didn't hesitate to strike. I blocked an incoming attack and I struck the first sticker down. As the sticker fell, I noticed their weapons had started glowing purple, a spell of some kind. Excalibur, dagger formation! I called out. Excalibur shifted into twin identical daggers. I then started fighting off the stickers, making sure I didn't get hit by their glowing weapons. I made sure to hit their shoulders, hips, knees, and necks, which were their weak points. I managed to take out the squad of stickers. I let out a sigh, and I stood victorious. Then I noticed down the road stood 3 stickers with crossbows. They fired their arrows, also glowing purple. Excalibur, shield formation! I called out. The dagger shifted into a large shield. I stood in front of the young woman, and the arrows hit the shield and dropped to the ground. Excalibur, bow formation! I called out. My shield shifted into a bow. I placed my other hand out, and an energy arrow formed into a spark of silver light. I drew the arrow and fired it. It hit one of the stickers in the head, and it dropped to the ground. I fired 2 more and hit the other 2 stickers, defeating them. The bow shifted back into the sword form, and I helped the young woman to her feet. Thank you so much, she cried, wiping away her tears. Hey, give yourself some credit. You held yourself pretty well out there before I showed up, I said encouragingly. Thanks, she sighed. I looked around to see if there was any more foot soldiers around, and that's when I saw a sticker carrying a vial of red liquid with green bubbles. It lifted the vial into the air and poured it all over itself. The liquid sizzled, then the sticker started to grow. It grew and grew until it overtowered the buildings. The young woman let out a shriek and I took a deep breath. I'd spent the last 6 weeks learning everything I could about Excalibur, and it was time to put it to the test. I took a few steps forward, then I ran 2 fingers across the blade and it started to glow red. I then tossed the sword into the air as hard as I could. Excalibur, Lion Sword formation! I barked out. The sword flashed red and silver, and a blinding light ignited the sky, and the silver and red lion sword landed in front of the giant sticker. I jumped up high and landed on the lion sword's head. No more running, I growled. The lion sword swung its claws and struck the sticker. The sticker retaliated with a swing of its sword, the blade hitting the lion sword, making it stumble. Let's try another angle, I muttered. The lion sword jumped back like it read my mind. Excalibur, falcon sword formation! I called out. I jumped up and let the lion shift into a falcon. I landed on the falcon sword's head and the falcon took flight and we soared through the air. The falcon soared down and with its wings clipped the sticker's leg, forcing it down on one knee. I jumped into the air once again. Excalibur, rhino sword formation! I called out. The Falcon Zord shifted into a Rhino Zord, and I landed on its head, and the Rhino Zord charged in and slammed into the sticker, knocking it off its feet. The massive grunt crashed onto several buildings, and I crouched down and launched myself high into the air. Excalibur, final strike formation! I screamed. The Rhino Zord disappeared in a flash of silver and red. The Excalibur came flying up and I caught the sword. I held it above my head and with both hands. The blade started glowing and the blade extended and became a massive-sized Megazord sword that only a Megazord could wield. I then swung the massive sword over my head and let go of the handle, and the tip of the massive sword made out of pure light stabbed into the massive sticker. It let out a groan and exploded. The sword reverted back to its normal size and I landed on the ground safe. I held up my hand and in a glistening flash, Excalibur once again was in my hand. I sheathed the sword onto my back and walked over to the young woman. "That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen," the woman gasped. "Thanks," I said with a shrug. "No, thank you," the girl smiled. "Hey, what are you doing out here?" I asked her. "I got a message from Merlin. He wants to meet me and he's got some mission. They wanted me to join. Something like that anyway. It's why those skeleton things were after me, I think," the woman explained. "You better keep moving then. I better keep moving too. Good luck," I told her, quickly moving away from the fact that she mentioned Merlin. I nodded at her and turned away. "Wait, what's your name?" the woman asked me. "You can call me Ace," I told her. "Nice to meet you, Ace. My name's Sam," the woman said. "Well, Sam, if I don't see you again, good luck," I replied. Then I walked away. I certainly hoped Sam would find Merlin sooner rather than later. Seemed like Morgan Le Fay was getting desperate to finding me and Excalibur, and she wanted to get rid of Merlin, but I did not want to put her in any more danger than Sam was already in. Plus, a small part of me did not want to talk to Merlin, as I did steal Excalibur after all. I walked for a while, watching the sun setting as I strolled through the streets. Then everything went black. I woke up and climbed off the bed.
Sir, your 8 hours here equal to 6 weeks, 1 day, 7 hours and 12 minutes in that universe,
Daisy told me. "Thanks, Dee," I replied. I then walked over to the console and made a note of the cluster of universes connecting to the Red Cornish Ranger and his travels throughout. "Seems like I have more to do with Mark than I realised," I sighed. I then went and contacted Sparks to let him know that Excalibur had more significance in other types of universes. Maybe it was a weapon we had to keep in mind.
What you have just listened to is a product created by the Three Ranger Bros Studio.
Hosted by 3 cosplaying fathers who
happen to be massive geeks of all sorts of fandoms.
They are Mark, the Red Cornish Ranger,
Cosplay Dude 637.
And Ty Tiger.
The studio covers different types of YouTube videos, TikToks, podcasts, and live streams.
If you wish to find out who cosplays who, the YouTube channel, the TikTok accounts, and the podcasts, and all of the other social media platforms,
please go to the 3rangerbrostudios.com.